Hello everyone. So this is our session 1 in readings and discourse analysis. Session 1 actually is going to entail lecture 1 and 2. You will be introduced to the basic notions of discourse and discourse analysis. Alright, so let's get started. So as shown in the outline, we're going first of all to define what discourse is in terms of the etymology of the word. Etymology simply means the history of the word, so just to know where the word comes from basically. And then we will be introduced to different definitions of the word discourse that are postulated and presented by different linguists. Finally, we're going to draw a kind of a comparison between text and discourse, as these two words have always been used interchangeably. So we will see if discourse and text are identical or they are different. Then we have a couple of words or a couple of actions or questions regarding the core of linguistics or of discourse analysis. The first question is, what is discourse analysis? Always abbreviated as AD or DA. What is discourse analysis used for? Is discourse analysis based on critical or empirical approach? First of all, the etymology of the word. As I have explained, that etymology means the history or the origin of the term. Discourse comes originally from Latin discursus, and discursus in Latin means running or going back and forth. According to Wiktionary, discourse comes from French discours, and discours en français means a conversation or a speech, and it is originally from Latin discursus, the act of running about. Okay, so just to begin with discourse, drawing the difference actually between text and discourse has always been confusing among discourse analysts and linguists, okay, as both of them have been used interchangeably. Some linguists would say, or discourse analysts would say, that both of them, text and discourse, are the same, they are identical, and they mean the same thing, while others would think, or they would argue, that both of them are different and they are poles apart. So there has always been a kind of a debate over this issue. Widowson, 1984, defines discourse as a communicative process by means of interaction. The interaction requires, between, for example, speaker and hearer, between writer and reader, and there is always like a target audience in there. While text doesn't necessarily include specific agents, it could simply be an informative sentence. Take this example. Smoking here is banned. Now, such a sign usually found in public spaces. This is a text that doesn't have any social or cultural or societal dimensions. It's just an informative text. Okay. So while discourse is something that incorporates themes of culture and society and identity as well. The chart here shows the kind of differences or the major differences and distinctions between the two terms text and discourse, according to some discourse analysts and linguists. A text is usually a written form of communication, which is usually non-interactive in nature. Okay, and it could be also interactive, but it doesn't, go deeper than it is. Okay, النص لا يحتمل أبعاد كثيرة. Okay, while discourse is, it could be spoken, it could be written, it could be visual, it could be audio form, communicating information that is interactive in nature. Okay. Agents are not crucial in a text. Okay, for example, a recipe of a Greek dish, we have ingredients and instructions of cooking, so there is no real interaction in there. Okay, while in discourse, if the text there is a kind of interaction, communication between the reader or the writer and the reader, or the speaker and the hearer, then we are actually having agents here and target audience. Text, social and historical and cultural aspects are not involved, while in discourse, contextual elements of culture, society, and history are involved. So once a text has dimensions of culture, society, of social practices, and so on, so it is immediately can be termed as discourse. Okay, so a text can be discourse, but discourse is not a text. So the question, what is a text? A text can be defined as an object that can be read, whether it is a work of literature, a lesson written on the blackboard, a recipe, or a street sign. It is a coherent set of linguistic units that transmit some kind of informative message and nothing more. While discourse, the term has many meanings and definitions. It's very intricate and complex. Discourse was first interpreted as dialogue, okay, an interaction between a speaker and their hearer. Thus, discourse referred to authentic everyday communications, mainly oral, including in the wide communicative context. But then, modern day discourse analysis refers to, you know, any audio or visual or written or any spoken text that holds any cultural and societal dimensions. Okay, look at this example. The father says to his son, "Is that your coat on the floor?" The son says yes, and he goes and grabs the coat. Okay, so look at this example. So this is a simple question. Is that your coat on the floor? The son says yes. Now, if we are to analyze this according to discourse analysis, the father's question is nothing but a command to his son to pick up the coat, because the coat is thrown on the floor and it should be hanged and put in the right place. The son deals with his father's command positively and simply answers yes and goes on doing the action, picking up the coat. Now we see here that the son's reaction to his father's question shows that the father here is a superior agent here. He is the one who gives commands and instructions, and so the son is being submissive. Okay, so if we are to analyze this according to stochastic analysis, is that your coat on the floor? Now this is a yes or no question. Okay, this question uses simple vocabulary, and that's it basically. The son answers yes. Okay, so in stylistics we're doing a more or less linguistic kind of description or account to the data we are working with. Now imagine if the son asks here, "Is that your coat on the floor, father?" And the father says yes, goes on and grabs the coat. Now how would the interpretation would be? Would it be the same? And this is a question that you have to think about. A president says, "I declare war on China." A simple sentence that results with a great action. Now, this is a very simple sentence. I declare war on China. Now, if an ordinary person says it, it would have no impact. Okay? If an ordinary person goes out in the streets and screams, I declare war on China. I declare war on China. No, his sentence is nothing. Okay? But when a president says this, and considering the background of the speaker, his or her position being as the president or the king or a person of authority, um, one simple sentence can change the history of the universe. Okay, so this is actually part of discourse analysis, and words like I declare war, or words like I announce you a husband and wife, these sentences are called as speech acts. Why they are called as speech acts? Because they are sentences that takes on actions behind them or after them. A person says to his wife, I divorce you. Generally, discourse analysis is sometimes defined as the analysis of language beyond sentence, or it is the study of language in use. And when you analyze the language, you have to analyze it in a very objective, in a critical way, and in a sensible way, so that you come up with conclusions that are based on evidence. All right, so the analysis of discourse may include like job interviews, political speech, newspaper articles, advertisements, casual conversations, religious scriptures, and so on. Okay, so you have, for example, a point of view that, for example, uh, men and women are not equal in Islam. So, what would critical discourse analysis do is that they would uh, study the religious scriptures and try to come up with data, and also study of the language used. All right, so things are not taken just on the surface, but they would rather actually dive into the messages between lines by trying to come up with a broader image about how women and men are viewed in, for example, Islam. All right, so we are here working beyond a sentence. We are not um, concerned with just one sentence or two and concerned about the structure or the unit. It's actually a larger process than that. All right, so when Barack Obama actually was nominated and consequently elected as the first black American person in history to be, in the White House, many actually have studied the discourse of Barack Obama and what made him the most popular American president in history. Okay, now many people didn't know about Obama, but they voted for him because of the power of his discourse. Okay, and remember that when we study Barack Obama speeches, we don't say we are studying his texts, but we are studying the discourse, how things are constructed in his mind and are manifested in his language and his text. And so we are coming up with the way how Barack Obama managed to persuade Americans to believe in him and to trust him. All right, another simple example. There have been many studies on discourse analysis to how bosses or see that is the CEO, or the managers talk to their employees over time. And these studies have shown that, for example, in the discourse have or has changed completely, like during the 40s up to 50s, up to the 70s, and now things are changing. And so the language between the boss or the manager and the employees is achieving a kind of equality. How did we know about this? Is by um, uh, investigating the language of uh, bosses or managers with their employees. Now, if you just like record or take notes about how, for example, business meetings are run nowadays between a manager and his employees, you would think like this is a very friendly meeting, and so on, because you cannot actually like distinguish between who is the manager and who is the employees, because businesses nowadays are being based on equal footing. You have to befriend the people you're working with. Even if you are a manager, you have to speak with them in a certain way so that you can achieve equality and so on. So there is no that kind of power and language that was exhibited before. All right. um, and also like how Black Americans, for example, were seen. And or for example, let's go to the history chronicles, how red Indians or Native Americans were chronicled in history books. They have always been seen as savage, um, very animalized and so on. And even like in the movies, we have a very distinctive discourse about Native Americans. And this idea or this discourse have been created by the Westerns or the Americans, so that they could justify that they have the right to, for example, to come to America and occupy the land and to make it a great nation, because they have the power to do this, and they are more um, you know civilized, while the Native Americans are primitive and so on. All right. Also, like this applies to the studies of Edward Said, and we will be devoting a special lesson for him, or lecture for him. Edward Said talked about how Arabs were viewed in the eyes of Orientalists. And who are the Orientalists? Orientalists are the people who came to the Middle East, and they lived with Arabs, and they kept some chronicles and records about how Arabs were. And these Orientalists actually came during the Ottoman Empire or before that. So when they came, they kept some chronicles about the Arabs. The way how they viewed the Arabs legitimized their colonialism, okay, or it was a kind of preparing the ground for colonializing these nations. These nations were primitive. These nations were, uncivilized. And these discourses also were created into pictures. And if you go like to Google engine and you type in the shortcut Orientalist, for example, paintings, you will see how Arabs were viewed, okay, as a word of luxury, with no mind, with no sense, and so on. So this is all about somehow about discourse analysis. So we are moving toward things that are beyond language, beyond. We are talking about history here. We're talking about culture here. We're talking about sociology here. We're talking about psychology here. So this is something that is very broad. Now, when you look at this, you will find that this goes in contrast with what is generally known about linguistics. In linguistics, the focus is usually on grammar, structure, and form, and units, and so on, clauses, types, and okay. This strict view of language has been especially praised by Chomsky's theory of ideal speaker here. However, with the emergence of the field of discourse analysis, this perspective has completely changed about language, and language is now seen as something bigger than that. Language is highly tied to other variables of context and meaning. So, in discourse analysis, we encompass and incorporate concepts of culture, pragmatics, semantics, applied linguistics, sociology, so to comprehend and to come to terms with language use in context. Discourse analysis, no text is neutral. Discourse analysis is also a branch of social sciences and other disciplines, including media and communication studies, as well as cultural studies, and they all actually aim at gathering communication text for analysis for certain purposes. The belief is that the use of language is never innocent. Language is always manipulated for our own interests, and it is leading with interpretations, and we always draw the interpretation that works best for our purposes. It focuses on the construction of language in text and takes it into account with the relationship between language and the sociocultural context in which it is used. Okay, think about this, for example. When for example, a political nominee, okay, uh, for example, one in four elections, some of them actually they would use in their speeches, appeals of religion. It's like they would come up with examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام. They would come up with some verse from the Quran. They would do this in order to persuade the public, because the public are easily moved and emotionally, uh, moved with such appeals of language. Okay, When this actually is used as discourse tools, then this is actually part of the discourse analysis, and therefore discourse analysts, they try to come up with reasons or with ideas or with conclusions behind every text or every discourse. When you do discourse analysis, you might focus on the purpose and effects of different types of language, like ads on TV encouraging people to take on the COVID 19 vaccine. Okay, they would do it, for example, by bringing some pictures of sick people, of dying people, of coffins, of devastated families who lost their dear ones after uh, the COVID 19. And so they would encourage the public by bringing up these, for example, pictures and so on, and they would in this way persuade you to go and take on the vaccine. Cultural rules and conventions, communication on Fridays, sermons, or when someone asks for a girl's hand, they usually have special openings before the actual ask. And these are also part of discourse analysis. So discourse analysis also investigates like the hidden intentions of text, and they also study the formats or the forms of social practices that are presented in language. So remember, it's the language in use. Okay, they also look at how language use relates to its social, political, and historical context. We may study how women, for example, were addressed in the 18th century in terms of titles of address in Libya. Okay, for example, words like or titles like Hanem and Lalla, and how these titles of address have changed over time. Okay, they would also track the history of such features of social addressing. And so your analysis should always be based on documents or records. You can't work without data, of course, and this is why it is absolutely 100% empirical. What is discourse analysis used for? Conducting discourse analysis means examining how language functions and how meaning is created in different social contexts and affects the public. Materials that are suitable for discourse analysis include books, newspapers, advertisements, social media posts, interviews, and casual everyday conversations. Do you remember what happened when Trump gave that speech to his audience? They immediately went to the House of Parliament, and they just, you know, flooded flooded actually to the House of Parliament after the speech. Okay, so if you read the speech of Trump, there was no direct words, you know, um, constructing the people to go to that place. But there were some hints, and the way how he put it made the public understand that they should be going in there and object about what was going on against him. Alright, so by analyzing these types of discourse, researchers aim to gain an understanding of social groups and how they communicate. Remember, discourse analysis is a research method for studying written or spoken language in relation to its social context. It aims at understanding how language is used in real life situations. Remember, like shopkeeper persuading the client to buy the product. okay, and sometimes you don't want it, you don't need it, but he convinces you in a way or another by using these a special discourse that makes you unhesitant to buy the product. And it also discourse analysis investigates the hidden messages and the way how ideas are structured in the mind toward, for example, certain things. Okay, you remember, like during the Iraqi war, the American media used a discourse that was so much, that appealed to the Americans, so that they would accept uh, going on and doing the war on Iraq, because if you ask Americans, they would never agree to do the war. But how to persuade them is by, using special words like, for example, uh, the Iraq war. They would never actually say about the Iraq war or raids as colony or as colonizing the country, or they would no, they simply said that it was an operation of freedom. Okay, you see now the words are very much euphemistic. All right, what is the main focus of discourse? It examines or deconstructs, that is to say, to break down the underlying meanings in speech or other forms of communicative text. The focus of discourse analysis is on the language used, what the implicit underlying taken for granted or concealed meanings might be. Okay? In the PDF file that you have, there is a speech given by Martin Luther King. You know, that speech changed the history of Black Americans and made them gain their rights as full American citizens having the right to vote. You see, so just one speech made a change in history. Okay, and so people, like, after this speech, they went on studying how effective was that speech and what kind of devices used by the speaker, that is to say Martin Luther King. And it was actually a study or a goal of study by many discourse analysts throughout history. Also think about this, how power relations are exhibited in language. Okay, so discourse analysis is also interested in this field, how power relations are exhibited in language. For example, teacher student class discourse. Okay, so usually the discourse is quite unlike, for example, a discourse between friends, but the discourse of teacher student is quite serious, is quite, and how the seriousness is expressed. Okay, we also may study boss versus employee discourse, and this was actually a field of research for many discourse analysts, just to track how bosses or managers change the way of their discourse over time. In the past, it was a very strict kind of discourse, but nowadays managers and employees tend to be at ease, especially that most businesses are run on equal footings by team working. And so if you just record a meeting between a manager and their employees, sometimes you might not spot who is the employee and who is the manager because of things has changed. So this is actually, we're doing something social, we are doing something historical, okay, and we are investigating language from a social and historical point of view. Okay, now if you go, for example, in media, how Arabs are represented in Western media, okay, especially during, for example, the 11th of September, how were they presented as terrorists, okay, and especially, and that was only a passport to go to raid Afghanistan and raid Iraq. So they made the people believe that Arabs are terrorists, and the mainstream media at the time, whenever there is something wrong, um, for example, done by any Arab person or by a Muslim person, they would always write, for example, a Muslim kills, for example, um, a shopkeeper in the supermarket. But when a white person does it, they would only say a man kills, for example, a shopkeeper in a supermarket, without relating his religious background. Okay, I have never read an article or a newspaper title where there is a Jewish person kills or robs money from a bank or something. Of course, this happens every day. Or a mother kills her children. We never actually, they have such crimes, and when they are committed, we don't know about the criminals' religious backgrounds. But during that period, and they still actually do that now, just to show how they try to smear the reputation of Islam by, for example, saying that a Muslim, for example, stole a book from a museum and so on. You don't have to say that. You simply could say, for example, a teenager stole a book from. So why are you like bringing up the religion of the criminal or of the doer? So this is actually a discourse that is made here and makes people more aware of Muslims being terrorists, being criminals, okay, while hundreds and thousands of crimes might happen and nobody knows about the religious backgrounds or even the racial backgrounds of the criminals. Another point, think about how Native Americans, that is to say Red Indians, were chronicled in history textbooks according to Western perspectives. Okay, they have always been chronicled as savage, as animalized, as very you know uh, beast likes, and eating human flesh, and they are always like yelling and screaming and doing black magic. And this is what we have. We don't know about Red Indians, and this is the only picture we have about them, because that is what the Westerns told us about Red Indians. And this is how discourse is built here. Okay, is discourse analysis based on critical or empirical approach? Discourse analysis includes two main basic approaches. It is both, in fact, empirical and critical. What do we mean by empirical? It is descriptive, it is linguistic, it is textual, it is quantitative. Okay, so we study the text and see, yes, some of the linguistic features, but it is primarily and superiorly critical in nature. It is very applied, pragmatic, contextual, okay, societal. It's very qualitative. So these two approaches work together and cohere to make things meaningful in a broader sense.